In the summer of 1998, a newborn named Amelia Brooks vanished from the Ridgewood General Hospital nursery without a trace. 17 years later, during routine furnace maintenance, a crematory technician finds her intact hospital anklet wedged inside an old intake fan, still bearing her name. What investigators uncover next reveals a hidden passage, a stolen childhood, and a chilling truth no one was ready to face. The furnace room always smelled wrong: acrid, metallic, damp. Barry Hadley, 49, had worked Ridgewood Crematory's back systems for over a decade, and no amount of coffee or gum masked the odor. On this Tuesday morning, he was halfway through his maintenance list, irritated. A third intake blockage in less than 6 weeks. He rolled his eyes, grabbed his headlamp, and crouched beside the industrial cremation unit's lower vent panel. Maintenance log says fans slowing again, he muttered, tugging off the casing with a cordless drill. The panel clanged to the floor. Behind the grill, something pale glinted in the light. Barry reached in with gloved fingers and fished it free. A plastic loop, baby-sized, with rusted metallic threading inside. He turned it slowly in his palm, a hospital anklet, scorched but intact. A faint barcode. One line of text, just barely legible. Amelia Brooks, 070498, Ridgewood Gen. His stomach turned. He knew the name. Everyone did. Back in '98, Ridgewood had made national news. A newborn, stolen in the middle of the night from the locked nursery, the mother asleep, no broken windows, no forced entry, just gone. Cameras caught nothing. Security guards saw nothing. They'd called it the miracle vanish. And now, her anklet, down here? He stood, heart racing, looked at the panel's bolts. New solder, recent. Fresh copper sheen glinted at the edges. Someone had sealed this panel not long ago, long after the unit was replaced in 2010. Why the hell would an anklet from '98 be inside a modern cremation unit? He muttered. He dropped the anklet into a specimen bag, sealed it, and bolted, back up the stairs. That same afternoon, Detective Serena Clark sat hunched over a stack of cold case notes, her third cup of instant coffee going cold. Amelia Brooks's file was there, her mother's tear-stained statement, grainy nursery footage, and a post-it someone had scrawled in red. No signs of struggle. Badge access log corrupted. Clark hadn't expected to reopen it until the bag was dropped on her desk. She opened it, staring at the anklet. Then she flipped the chain of custody tag, recovered from Ridgewood Crematory Intake Fan, Unit 3C, Barry Hadley. 9:42 a.m. Where exactly was this? She asked the technician, now seated across from her. Inside the vent, near the furnace fan. It wasn't charred like you'd expect. It was lodged between slats, jammed sideways. She turned it in her hand, noting the intact barcode, her brow furrowed. 17 years, Barry nodded. And that panel? Whoever resealed it used solder that's barely oxidized. Meaning recent. Meaning someone didn't want it found. Later that evening, she walked the empty halls of Ridgewood General, now half-renovated and rebranded. The nursery wing had been repurposed into offices, but the basement layouts remained. She met building supervisor Ron Greeley near the old laundry shaft junction. We removed these chutes after the '96 fire code update, he explained, tapping a blueprint spread across a dusty steel table. Clark leaned in. Except this one, he continued, tracing a faded line. It ran from the nursery laundry room straight down here. To where? The furnace room. Before incinerators, hospitals used chute-fed thermal units to burn linens. But this one, someone added a manual latch after '96. See this? He pointed. A faint rectangle had been penciled into the plan. Unofficial. And when was it sealed? Log shows, July 5th, 1998. Clark blinked. 1 day after Amelia Brooks disappeared. Greeley hesitated. Want to see it? Clark nodded. They stepped through a side access tunnel. Metal doors creaked open into the old furnace wing. The smell was immediate. Smoke, copper, and chemical ash. Greeley gestured toward a cement wall. There, behind a row of unused ducts, was a sealed square. Torch marks surrounded the edge, newer than the wall's original paint. Clark knelt, brushed her fingers along the edge. The metal was warm. Someone had torched this shut not years ago, but months. Her phone buzzed. A message from evidence processing. Intake. Anklet, prelim DNA match, trace organic material present. She straightened, heart pounding. 17 years later, Amelia Brooks's anklet had returned, clean, preserved, and carrying enough DNA to trace. In that moment, the furnace behind her let out a low groan, a dying exhale from the room that had swallowed a newborn whole. But now, the dead room was talking back, and someone was about to be exposed. July 6, 2015, Ridgewood General Hospital, sub-basement level. Detective Serena Clark stepped through the arching furnace threshold for the second time that week, the stale air clinging to her throat. Behind her, forensics tech Jonah Patel wheeled in a ground-penetrating radar unit, cables trailing like vines. Sealant still tacky, he noted, kneeling near the wall panel where the old chute had once fed the furnace chamber. Clark watched the unit flicker on. "No one's used this chute in years," she said quietly. "And yet, the solder is less than 6 months old." Jonah tapped at his screen. "Someone didn't just seal it, they rebuilt part of the paneling." Clark crouched beside him. The thermal imaging on the display showed an odd pattern, heat signature anomalies within the wall cavity. She pointed. "There. That's not natural sedimentation. Someone accessed the space." Jonah adjusted the frequency. "Could be insulation disturbed, or a crawl. Either way, it's man-made." "From above?" she asked. Jonah nodded. "And likely from the nursery floor." By 11:30 a.m., a structural engineer had joined them. Together they accessed the blueprints again. Ridgewood's renovations had covered much of the original nursery architecture, but beneath the modern drywall and partitions, the original 1950s layout remained. And on sheet A14, Clark spotted it. Between the old laundry prep room and the chute shaft, this void space, the engineer frowned. "Looks like an unrecorded maintenance crawl, maybe 18 inches high. Just enough for someone lying flat to squeeze through." "Wouldn't a staffer know about it?" The engineer shrugged. "It's not listed on any modern updates. If someone used it, they found it the hard way." Later that day, they drilled through the furnace chute seal. The blowtorch hissed, sparks flying. Jonah stood ready with a respirator and UV wand. The panel gave way with a groan, revealing the long closed cavity beyond. Clark stepped forward, light flooding the shaft. The air inside was damp, still. Nestled in the dust and fibers below was a tuft of white cotton. She reached with forceps, baby clothing, charred at the edges, embroidered with a single pink stitch. AB, they bagged it instantly. Jonah turned, his voice tight. "Detective, this chute wasn't sealed to prevent contamination. It was sealed to bury something." Clark exhaled slowly. "They didn't just take her. They dragged her through here." Later that night, she returned to the main floor. The former nursery had been gutted in 2004, now a fluorescent-lit HR office with neutral carpets and filing cabinets. She stepped inside quietly, ignoring the surprised looks from administrative staff. "Who supervises this floor?" she asked, showing her badge. A woman named Tara offered to help. She pulled up historical access logs and floor designations. "This room," she said, "used to be Ward 7B. "Nursery?" Clark asked. Tara nodded. "Back in the day, yeah. Then for a while, it stored linens." "And before 98? Tara hesitated. "Still the nursery then, but I remember, it always had weird wiring issues. Lights flickered. Some of the cleaning staff swore it was haunted." Clark glanced at the corner where the crawl space would align beneath. Nothing now but a filing cabinet and dusty baseboard, but she imagined the morning after the disappearance. A baby taken through a wall, lowered down a chute, caught mid-slide, someone retrieving her from below. The floor was quiet now, but she felt the weight of the past in every soundless corner. She turned to leave. Jonah met her at the elevator. He held out a test strip and envelope. "Results are in," he said. "We got organic matter from the anklet, sweat trace, old skin cells, enough for DNA matching. And," he hesitated, "match came back." "To who?" He passed her a printed file, one black and white photo paperclipped at the top. Harold Dempsey. Orderly. Employed at Ridgewood from 1993 to 1998. Last day worked, July 6th, 1998. Clark flipped through the record. No red flags, no warnings, Never married, no children listed. Address listed in Missouri. Moved out 5 days after Amelia vanished. Jonah added, "You're going to want to see the secondary match too." He held out a second sheet. DNA sibling comparison, 99.8% match to Mia Dempsey, adopted daughter of Harold Dempsey, DOB, July 4th, 1998. Clark stared. 17 years. The girl, raised in another state, had lived a quiet life under a new name, and the man who claimed to have adopted her left town the day after Amelia vanished. She closed the file. The furnace hadn't just spit out a clue. It had coughed up a truth someone tried very hard to burn, and failed. The hospital's old blueprints were spread across the table, yellowed and brittle. Detective Serena Clark traced the faded lines with her finger, pausing at a narrow shaft connecting the nursery to the furnace room. "Decommissioned in 96, she murmured, "but someone used it in 98. Jonah Patel, the forensic tech, nodded. "Thermal scans show recent disturbances. Someone reopened it." Clark's eyes narrowed. Could it have been Harold Dempsey? Jonah hesitated. He was on shift the night Amelia disappeared, and he left town days later. Clark leaned back, the weight of the case pressing down on her. "We need to find him." In a modest house in Missouri, Harold Dempsey sat in his recliner, a photo album on his lap. The pictures chronicled the life of a girl named Mia, from her first steps to her high school graduation. He paused at a photo of Mia playing the violin, her eyes closed in concentration. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. He opened it to find 2 detectives on his porch. "Mr. Dempsey?" Clark asked, showing her badge. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about Ridgewood General Hospital." Back in Ridgewood, Clark and Jonah examined the crawl space between the nursery and the chute. The space was tight, barely enough for a person to squeeze through. Jonah pointed to fresh scratches on the metal. "Someone's been through here recently." Clark nodded. They knew the hospital's layout, knew about this passage. She turned to Jonah. "We need to find out who had access to this area in 98. In Missouri, Harold sat across from the detectives, his hands trembling. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Clark placed the anklet on the table. "This was found in the furnace intake. It belonged to Amelia Brooks." Harold's eyes widened. "That's not possible." "We have DNA evidence linking you to the anklet," Clark said. "And to Mia." Harold's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. She was so small, so helpless." Clark leaned forward. "Tell us what happened." Harold took a deep breath. "I found her alone in the nursery. No one was around. I took her." Back at the hospital, Clark reviewed the security logs from 1998. One name stood out, Harold Dempsey. He had access to the nursery and the furnace room. Clark turned to Jonah. "He planned this, used the chute to take Amelia." Jonah nodded, and sealed it afterward to cover his tracks. Clark's phone buzzed. It was a message from the Missouri police. Harold confessed. "Amelia is Mia." She closed her eyes, the weight of the revelation settling over her. In Missouri, Mia sat across from Clark, confusion etched on her face. "I don't understand," she said. "Harold is my grandfather." Clark gently placed a photo of Amelia Brooks on the table. "This is you. You were taken from your mother in 1998. Mia's eyes filled with tears. "My whole life. It's been a lie." Clark reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're here to help you find the truth." The Ridgewood General Hospital archives were a labyrinth of forgotten records and dust-laden files. Detective Serena Clark and forensic tech Jonah Patel navigated the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing against the linoleum floors. Clark pulled a file from the shelf, its label faded. "Employee records, 1998. Harold Dempsey," she read aloud. "Orderly, night shift." Jonah peered over her shoulder. His last day was July 6th, 1998. The day after Amelia disappeared, Clark flipped through the pages. No disciplinary actions, no complaints, just vanished. In Missouri, Harold Dempsey sat in his modest living room, the walls adorned with photographs of a young girl, Mia. She was the spitting image of Amelia Brooks. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Clark and Jonah on his porch. "Mr. Dempsey?" Clark asked, showing her badge. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about Ridgewood General Hospital." Harold's face paled. "I haven't worked there in years." Clark held up a photograph of the Anklet. "Recognize this?" Harold's hands trembled. "Where did you get that?" "It was found in the furnace intake," Clark replied. "Sealed behind a panel with fresh solder." Harold sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Back at Ridgewood, Clark and Jonah examined the sealed chute. The solder was indeed recent. "Someone tried to hide this," Jonah said. "But why?" Clark nodded. "Because it's the path he took to abduct Amelia." They traced the chute's path, leading from the nursery to the furnace room. "He knew the hospital's layout," Clark mused. "Used it to his advantage." In Missouri, Clark continued her questioning. "Why did you take her, Harold?" He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "She was so small, so helpless. I couldn't leave her there." Clark's voice softened. "You raised her as your own." He nodded. "I gave her a good life. She never knew." Back at Ridgewood, Clark reviewed the security logs from 1998. Harold's badge had been used to access the nursery and the furnace room. "He planned this," she said, "used his position to bypass security." Jonah pointed to a maintenance request dated July 5, 1998. He reported a malfunction in the furnace chute, probably to cover his tracks. Clark's phone buzzed. DNA results confirmed that Mia was indeed Amelia Brooks. In Missouri, Clark sat across from Mia, now 17. "I'm not who I thought I was," Mia whispered. Clark nodded. "But you have a family who never stopped looking for you." Mia's eyes welled with tears. "I want to meet them." Harold Dempsey's neighborhood in rural Missouri was silent as snow, the roads barely marked, the houses identical in their quiet modesty. Detective Serena Clark stood across the street from the white two-bedroom ranch with the navy shutters and watched through the windshield as the girl emerged. 17 years old, slender frame, dark hair. She wore headphones and walked with a violin case strapped across her back. Her posture was strong, calm, focused. Jonah Patel snapped a photo from the passenger seat. The image appeared on his tablet within seconds. Clark tapped open a file, facial age progression data from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The match was undeniable. "She has her mother's jawline," Clark murmured. Jonah nodded. "And Amelia Brooks's exact ear fold curvature. That's over 90% consistent." The girl, Mia Dempsey, stepped into her family's beat-up sedan and drove away, presumably towards school. Clark waited until the car disappeared before exiting the vehicle. They walked up the driveway and knocked. Harold answered in a flannel shirt, breathing unevenly. "I didn't expect you back," he said. "We won't speak to her yet," Clark assured, "but we need her school schedule. And to confirm that she doesn't suspect anything." Harold opened the door wider. "She thinks I'm her grandfather, always has." They stepped inside. The living room was clean but sparse. A shelf near the couch held only 3 things: a 1999 community music trophy, a copy of Little Women with "Happy 8th Mia" written inside, and a framed photo of Harold and Mia at a violin recital. She smiled wide. He looked decades younger. "You raised her alone?" Clark asked. Harold nodded. "No wife, no siblings, no help." Clark's tone cooled. "You also never filed any adoption papers. No birth certificate, no guardianship hearing." "I told people she was from my late niece. Said I took her in. Small town. Nobody asks much." Jonah pulled a folder from his satchel. "Did you ever try to contact her biological family?" Harold's eyes dropped. "No." Clark scanned the bookshelf. One photograph caught her attention. Mia, age 9, holding a paper that read, "Local Youth Composer Winner." Notes scribbled in crayon floated around her. "She's gifted," Clark said. Harold's voice softened. "She doesn't just play music. She writes it. From the time she was 4. Like she remembered something before she knew it." That afternoon, Clark sat with the school guidance counselor under pretense of a background check request. "Mia Dempsey?" the woman said. "Star student, musical prodigy, sweet kid. Do you know her plans after graduation?" "She's applying to conservatories. Boston, Chicago, maybe Juilliard. She's that good." "And her father?" The counselor hesitated. "Grandfather. She always calls him that. Her pop. He's quiet, protective, comes to every recital." Clark nodded slowly. "Has she ever asked about her birth parents?" "No. She told me once she was adopted young. Didn't want to dig. Said music was her real legacy." Later that evening, Clark reviewed her notes while Jonah uploaded voice samples to the forensic voice lab. "You think she remembers anything?" he asked. "Not consciously, but the mind stores sound, familiar patterns. We're compiling audio from the Brooks family, crib recordings, lullabies." "You want to see if it triggers something?" Clark nodded. "She doesn't know she's been living in a lie, but music might be the key." Back in Missouri, Mia lay on her bedroom floor, headphones in, eyes closed. Her violin lay beside her, sheet music scattered across the bed. She paused her playlist, flipped to a new composition draft, and scrawled a title across the top, "Amelia's Theme." She didn't know why the name felt familiar. She just knew the melody had come to her in a dream, one she'd had since childhood, of soft lights, of tiny bracelets, and of voices calling her name. One she didn't recognize, not Mia, but something older. The music room was silent, save for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Mia sat at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. A sheet of music lay before her titled Amelia's Theme. The notes were familiar yet foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. She played the first few bars, the melody haunting and melancholic. As the notes filled the room, memories surfaced. Flashes of a hospital room, a woman's gentle voice, the warmth of an embrace. A knock at the door startled her. She turned to see Detective Serena Clark standing in the doorway. "May I come in?" Clark asked. Mia nodded, her hands trembling. Clark entered, holding a folder. "I have something to show you." She handed Mia a photograph. It was of a newborn baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket, a tiny anklet around her ankle. "That's you," Clark said softly. "Your name is Amelia Brooks." Mia's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Clark sat beside her. "You were abducted from Ridgewood General Hospital in 1998. We found evidence linking your grandfather, Harold Dempsey, to your disappearance." Mia shook her head. "No, that's not possible. Pop would never—" Clark opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, and DNA results. "I'm sorry, Mia. The evidence is overwhelming." Tears streamed down Mia's face. "Why would he do this?" Clark placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We believe he wanted a child and took you when the opportunity arose. He raised you as his own." Mia looked down at the sheet music. "I've always felt like something was missing, like I didn't belong." Clark nodded. "Your biological mother has been searching for you for 17 years. She's never given up hope." Mia's voice was barely a whisper. "I want to meet her." Claire Brooks sat on the edge of the sterile interview room chair, her hands clutched tightly around the sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small, scorched plastic loop, the hospital anklet her daughter wore for precisely 4 days and 3 nights before disappearing forever. Her fingers trembled as she held it closer to the light. The name was still faintly legible, Amelia Brooks, 07-04-98. Claire pressed it to her lips. For 17 years, she'd kept every photo, every report, every sleepless anniversary vigil. But nothing, no psychic, no detective, no dream, had brought her closer than this one charred piece of plastic. A knock at the door startled her. Detective Serena Clark stepped in quietly. "She's real," Claire whispered. "This was hers." Clark nodded. "We've confirmed it. DNA, chain of custody, location of recovery." Claire blinked. "Then, she didn't die that night." "No, she was taken." Clark moved slowly, pulling a tablet from her folder. She set it on the table and tapped the screen. A photo appeared. A girl, 17, stood on a school stage with a violin. Her eyes closed, mouth slightly parted in concentration. Claire gasped. "She has my mother's chin," she said, voice breaking. Clark said nothing. "Have you told her?" Claire asked. "Not yet." Claire's hands gripped the anklet tighter. "Then you can't. Not until I see her." "We're arranging that," Clark assured, "but we need to prepare you. She's grown up believing Harold Dempsey is her grandfather. She's never asked about her birth." Claire swallowed hard. "She was a baby when he took her." "Yes, and he raised her well. No signs of abuse. But it was still a theft. He stole your daughter." Claire looked up, eyes red. "She'll hate me." "No," Clark said gently. "She just doesn't know you yet." Meanwhile, Mia Dempsey sat alone in a community center room with a youth therapist and Agent Julie Mendez, a specialist in reunification cases. A soft, instrumental track played in the background. "They said my real name is Amelia," she murmured. Mendez nodded. "Yes, Amelia Brooks. You were taken as a newborn." Mia traced circles on her jeans. "I don't understand. If Pop lied, was I ever really loved?" The therapist leaned in. "You were, and still are. He raised you with care. But now, your mother, your biological mother, wants to meet you." Mia looked up. "Will she know me?" "She's memorized your face from every baby photo she had," Mendez said. "She's dreamed of this moment for 17 years. Mia hesitated. "What if I don't feel anything?" "That's okay. This isn't about pressure. It's about truth." She closed her eyes, then opened them again. "Let's meet her." Later that afternoon, in a quiet, private room of the community center, Claire Brooks stood behind a two-way mirror, breath frozen. The door opened slowly. A girl entered, violin case over her shoulder, nervous. Claire stepped in, hands trembling. Mia looked up. Both froze. Claire couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Mia stared at her, taking in every feature. The resemblance was uncanny. Bone structure, eyes, even the way she tilted her head. Claire stepped forward, her voice cracked. "You were always Mia to him, but to me, you were always Amelia." Mia didn't answer. Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a tiny knit sock, pink with a fading ladybug. "You wore this on your first night home. I kept the pair." Mia stared at it. Claire placed it gently on the table between them. "You don't have to say anything, but I want you to know I never stopped looking." Mia's voice shook. "He said my parents were gone." Claire sat across from her. "We weren't. I never gave up." There was a pause. Then, "Why didn't you find me sooner?" Claire swallowed hard. "I tried, but he was careful. He moved, forged papers. There was nothing left to trace, until someone found that furnace." Mia looked down at the sock, then back up. "I've dreamed of a ladybug before," she whispered. "It always sat on a white crib rail." Claire's breath caught. "That was your crib," she said. "It had white slats and a mobile of clouds." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, without warning, Mia stood up. Claire mirrored her. They stood inches apart. Mia reached forward, and Claire collapsed into her arms. They didn't speak. They just held each other. 17 years of silence, shattered in a single embrace. The courtroom was hushed, the air thick with anticipation. Harold Dempsey sat at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly together. Across the room, Claire Brooks sat with her daughter, Mia, formerly known as Amelia, by her side. The resemblance between mother and daughter was undeniable. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Once seated, the proceedings began. The prosecutor stood, addressing the court. Your Honor, we are here today to determine the appropriate sentencing for Harold Dempsey, who has pled guilty to the abduction of Amelia Brooks in 1998. He continued, detailing the events of that fateful night, the evidence found, and the years of fifacy, deception that followed. When it was the defense's turn, Harold's attorney spoke. Your Honor, while my client acknowledges his wrongdoing, he asks for leniency. He raised Amelia with love and care, providing her with a stable home. The judge listened intently, then turned to Harold. Mr. Dempsey, do you have anything to say? Harold stood, his voice trembling. I know what I did was wrong. I stole a child from her mother, but I loved her. I raised her as my own. I'm sorry. The judge nodded solemnly. Given the circumstances, I sentence you to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Claire held Mia's hand tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Claire stepped forward. I've waited 17 years for this day. While nothing can undo the past, I hope this brings some closure. Mia added, I have 2 families now. It's complicated, but I'm learning to navigate it. As they walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow on mother and daughter, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. The old nurse's handwriting was spidery, deliberate, pressed hard into the yellowing pages of a 1998 journal. The entry was dated July 5th, just hours after Amelia Brooks disappeared from the Ridgewood Nursery. Detective Serena Clark read aloud, woke at 3:40 a.m. to what sounded like a baby crying, thought it was the newborn in room 4C, but that crib was empty, already moved back to postnatal. Sound came from down near the chute. I stood there, listening. Then it stopped. Should have called security, but I was so tired. Clark glanced at Jonah Patel, who was scanning the margins. There's something scribbled here, he said, tilting the book. 3:41 a.m. Smelled solder. Clark's eyebrows lifted. She heard a baby, Jonah said, then smelled melting metal. That's the night he sealed the chute. Clark flipped the next page. There was only one thing written. She's warm now. A shiver ran down her spine. Keep going, she said. Jonah turned the page. Tucked into the fold was a small slip of paper, a mail stub, a postcard, never stamped, never sent. On it, a stock image of a lighthouse. On the back, Lighthouse, Southfield, storage key inside. Southfield, 40 miles east, was once a booming docktown. Now, it was an aging community with shuttered storefronts and a declining population. Clark and Jonah pulled into the Southport self-storage complex just after noon. The sea air was thick, the wind carrying the scent of rusted salt. Unit 117 was barely wide enough to fit a car. When the lock clicked open, the scent of mildew and rusted steel hit them. Inside, shelving units, a battered cot, and dozens of dusty boxes. Smells like it's been untouched for years, Jonah muttered. Clark opened the first box. Hospital linens. Tags still stitched in. Ridgewood General Laundry, 1997. Another box held photos, newspaper clippings, violin programs. She pulled one closer. It was a flyer for a recital. Age 8, Mia Dempsey, original composition. Taped to the back was a name in ballpoint ink, Amelia. Jonah opened a crate marked Tools. Inside was a soldering iron, industrial grade, still dusted with flakes of metal. He turned it over, finding a sticker from Ridgewood's facilities depth. Clark stared at the iron. This is it. This is what he used to seal the chute. She pulled out another item, a cassette tape labeled Lullabies 97, 98. Jonah offered his field recorder. Pop it in. The tape hissed, then played soft, warbling static. Then a voice, a woman's, Claire Brooks, singing. Rockabye Baby in the treetop. Clark froze. Then, beneath the lullaby, something else. A second voice, a male. Say goodnight, Amelia. Shh. Clark's hands clenched. He'd recorded her, held her, kept souvenirs from the night he took her. A sound echoed outside. A metallic clink. Someone had stepped on gravel. Clark snapped the light off. Both froze. Another footstep. Jonah leaned toward the back window. "We're being watched." Clark stepped out, gun drawn. "Police, show yourself." Silence. A shape darted behind the storage units. They gave chase. Through the maze of concrete rows, out past the main gate. But the figure vanished into the nearby woods. Clark stopped, panting. "He was here," she said, "or someone who knows about the journal." Jonah looked back at the unit. Someone didn't want us finding that tape. That evening, Clark met Claire at her apartment. She played the tape in full. When Claire heard her own voice singing, she broke. That was her bedtime song. "I used to sing it every night." When the male voice came in, soothing, eerie, wrong, she trembled. "That's not my husband," she said. "That's him." She placed a hand over her mouth. "I thought she was gone, but he kept her warm. He thought he was doing right." Clark nodded. "But he wasn't alone. Someone else was there. Someone tried to erase this storage unit. Someone watched us today." Claire's eyes widened. "You think someone else helped him take her?" Clark didn't answer, but deep inside, she felt it. Harold had soldered the chute, carried the girl, raised her. But someone else knew where she'd been all these years, and they were still watching. The Ridgewood General Hospital boardroom was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the projector, casting images onto the screen. Detective Serena Clark stood at the front, addressing the assembled staff. "This is a photograph of the furnace intake where Amelia Brooks's anklet was found," she began, pointing to the image. 17 years ago, this hospital failed to protect one of its most vulnerable patients. Murmurs filled the room as staff members exchanged uneasy glances. Clark continued, "Our investigation has uncovered a series of oversights and, frankly, negligence that allowed Harold Dempsey to abduct an infant and raise her as his own." She clicked to the next slide, displaying a blueprint of the hospital. This chute, connecting the nursery laundry to the furnace room, was unsealed the night of the abduction and resealed shortly after. Fresh solder marks were found, indicating recent tampering at the time. A hand raised from the back. It was Dr. Evelyn Harper, the hospital's chief of staff. "Detective Clark, are you implying that our staff was complicit?" Clark met her gaze. "I'm stating that procedures were not followed, and that allowed a predator to exploit the system." GeneralHospitalFandom.com. Dr. Harper nodded solemnly. "Understood. We'll cooperate fully with any further investigations." Meanwhile, in a quiet cafe across town, Amelia sat across from her mother, Claire Brooks. The two sipped their drinks in silence, the weight of years lost hanging heavily between them. "I used to dream about you," Amelia said softly. "I didn't know it was you at the time, but there was always this comforting presence." Claire reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. "I never stopped looking for you. Every day I hoped for this moment." Amelia smiled faintly. "It's strange. I have memories of Pop, Harold, but now I question everything." Claire squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay to feel conflicted. He raised you, but he also took you from me." Amelia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I want to get to know you, Mom." Claire's eyes shimmered. "And I want to make up for lost time." Back at the hospital, Clark and forensic tech Jonah Patel examined the furnace room once more. The area had been cordoned off, and the scent of rust and old metal lingered in the air. "We missed something," Clark muttered, scanning the room. Jonah pointed to a small, discolored patch on the wall. "There. That panel looks newer than the rest." Clark approached, prying it open to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside was a small box containing photographs, a lock of hair, and a diary. She opened the diary, flipping through the pages. "These are Harold's notes. He documented everything." Jonah peered over her shoulder. "This could be the key to understanding his motives." Clark nodded. "Let's get this analyzed." The hallway leading to Ridgewood's old nursery was silent. Newly painted walls disguised what it had once been, room 4C, where Amelia Brooks was taken 17 years ago. But one thing hadn't changed. the false wall across from the old nurse station. Detective Serena Clark stood beside a structural engineer, both wearing respirators as plaster dust hung in the air. "There's a cavity behind here," the engineer said. "Blueprints never mentioned it. Someone added this post-construction." Clark nodded. "And someone hid it." They removed the last segment of drywall, revealing a metal hatch. Cold, dust-caked, no handle, just 4 weld points around the edge. Fresh torch burns covered one corner. "Looks like it's been opened and resealed. Not 17 years ago, recently," the engineer muttered. Clark ran her gloved hand along the bottom. It wasn't just a hatch. It was a second access to the laundry chute. She looked up at the vent above. It was narrow. Adult shoulders couldn't pass, but a child could be slid through. She turned to Jonah Patel, who'd just arrived with a UV wand. "Scan the interior," she said. He aimed the light into the hatch. Faint biological traces lit up the metal walls, small hand smudges, a single partial footprint. Jonah's voice was tight. "Detective, she was passed through here." Clark crouched lower. Whoever did this hadn't just taken Amelia through the furnace chute. They had bypassed the main shaft entirely, carried her through this second route, hidden behind a fake wall. That meant Harold Dempsey hadn't acted alone. Cicero. Though meanwhile, in a room across town, Amelia sat beside Claire at a dining table, flipping through old photos. She paused on one, a photo of her birth father. He was young, smiling, holding a newborn. "That's the only picture we ever took," Claire said softly. "You were 3 days old." Amelia traced her thumb across the image. "I never got to know him." Claire nodded. "He died in a car accident 2 years after you were taken. He never stopped searching." A silence settled between them. "I have his eyes," Amelia said. Claire smiled. "You do, and his stubbornness." Later that day, Amelia stood alone in the hospital's courtyard, holding a visitor badge. The building looked different, modernized, but the ghosts lingered. She walked slowly toward the fountain at the center. Her memory flashed, a brief image, a trickle of water, a bench. She sat. Voices from her past echoed faintly, unbidden. Pop calling her name, Claire singing softly. The violin melodies she used to write before she even understood what music was. It all rushed in now, 2 lives colliding. Behind her, Detective Clark approached with quiet steps. "We found something," she said. Amelia looked up. Clark handed her a small box. Inside, a hospital blanket, scorched at the edges, faded pink. A nurse's tag safety pinned to the hem. Brooks, Amelia, 07-04-1998. "I didn't know they kept it," Amelia whispered. "They didn't," Clark said. "He did." That night, Clark met Claire outside Ridgewood's administrative wing. She handed her a file. "We found a second chute, behind the nursery wall. Someone reopened it recently." "Probably when the anklet surfaced." Claire's face tightened. "So, he had help. Or someone was watching, someone who knew that wall shouldn't exist." Claire glanced toward the hospital entrance, her voice low. "You think they're still here?" Clark didn't answer, but her silence said everything. The courtroom was silent as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Claire Brooks sat with her daughter, Amelia, holding her hand tightly. The journey to this moment had been long and fraught with pain, but they were finally here. The judge looked up, his expression solemn. After reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, this court finds Harold Dempsey guilty of the abduction of Amelia Brooks in 1998. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Claire closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Amelia squeezed her mother's hand, offering silent support. The judge continued. "Given the circumstances and the years that have passed, the court sentences Mr. Dempsey to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. Harold Dempsey showed no emotion as he was led away. Claire and Amelia watched him go, a mixture of relief and sorrow in their hearts. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Claire stepped forward, her voice steady. "Today marks the end of a long and painful chapter in our lives. While nothing can erase the years we lost, we can now begin to heal." Amelia added, I have two families now. It's complicated, but I'm learning to navigate it. The crowd dispersed, leaving mother and daughter to embrace, the weight of the past beginning to lift. In the months that followed, Amelia worked to rebuild her life. She returned to school, pursuing her passion for music. Claire supported her every step of the way, attending recitals and cheering her on. One evening, Amelia sat at the piano composing a new piece. Claire listened from the doorway, a smile on her face. That sounds beautiful, she said. Amelia turned, her eyes shining. It's called Homecoming. Claire walked over, hugging her daughter tightly. I'm so proud of you. As time passed, Amelia began to reconcile her two identities. She reached out to the Dempsey family seeking closure. They met for coffee, sharing memories and stories. I know what he did was wrong, Amelia said, but he raised me with love. I can't ignore that. Mrs. Dempsey nodded, tears in her eyes. He loved you as his own. We're grateful you turned out to be such a remarkable young woman. The meeting ended with hugs and promises to stay in touch, a step towards healing for all involved. Choptem. On the anniversary of her abduction, Amelia and Claire visited the hospital where it all began. They stood outside the nursery, now renovated and bustling with new life. Claire took Amelia's hand. 17 years ago, I lost you here. Today, I stand beside you, proud of the woman you've become. Amelia smiled, her eyes misty. Thank you for never giving up on me. They embraced, the past finally finding its place in their story.